Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into one of the most, bizarre and misunderstood parts of the entire Bible, the final vision in the book of Revelation.
I mean, think about it. The last couple of chapters describe a world that honestly sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. We're talking about a city that stretches 1,500 miles up into the sky, a planet with no oceans at all, and gates made out of single giant pearls. If you've ever read that and just thought, what on earth is going on here, you are definitely not alone.
But here's the twist. What if trying to picture all of this literally is completely missing the point? We're going to explore this really cool idea that to actually decode the very end of the Bible's story, you have to go all the way back to the very beginning.
So let's start by just laying out the puzzle, the challenge that the author, John, gives his readers right from the get-go.
He kicks things off with this absolutely wild statement. Not just a new world, but a world where the sea itself is just gone. Now, for any ancient reader whose entire world was shaped and often threatened by the sea, this would have been a truly staggering idea.
And then there's the New Jerusalem. John describes it as a perfect cube, so it's not just 1,500 miles long and wide, but a completely mind-bending 1,500 miles high. I mean, we're talking about a city that would extend far out into space. Taken literally, it just breaks your brain.
So you have to wonder, how were John's original readers, people living almost 2,000 years ago, supposed to make sense of any of this? They didn't have concepts of orbital rings or giant spaceships.
And this is the key. You have to understand that John wasn't trying to write science fiction. He was using a kind of symbolic code. And the decoder ring for that code was the one book his entire audience knew backwards and forwards, the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible.
You know, as biblical scholar Dr. Michael Heiser puts it, John just assumes his readers are soaked in the stories and the symbols and the big ideas of the Old Testament. He's not just making up new, strange pictures, he's taking ancient ones and giving them new life.
Okay, so let's take that key, the Old Testament, and use it to unlock three of the strangest symbols in this vision: that missing sea, the giant cube city, and all of those jewels.
First up, the sea. For us, we hear sea and we think, beach vacations and cruises. But in the Old Testament, totally different story. The sea was the source of chaos. It was a symbol of raw, untamable power, danger, and death. It's where monsters like the Leviathan lived.
So when John writes, "The sea was no more," he's not making a geological prediction. He's making a powerful theological statement. He's declaring the final, total, absolute end of all evil, all chaos, all death, everything that stands against God and life.
Okay, next up, that impossible city. A 1,500-mile cube makes absolutely no sense as a place for people to live. But there was one other incredibly important perfect cube in the Old Testament, the most holy place. This was the tiny inner room of the temple where God's very presence was said to dwell.
And suddenly the symbolism just clicks into place. It's powerful. God's presence, which was once confined to this tiny, inaccessible room, has now exploded to fill the entire new creation. The whole world has become God's sacred home.
And finally, what's the deal with that long, super detailed list of gemstones? Jasper, sapphire, emerald. It kind of feels like you're reading a jeweler's shopping list. Is the point just that it's all really rich and shiny?
Not at all. It turns out this very specific list of stones is almost a direct quote from the book of Ezekiel, where he describes the original Garden of Eden. Ezekiel calls Eden the Garden of God and says it was covered in these very same precious stones. So, when you put all these decoded symbols together, the end of all chaos, the whole world becoming God's home, and the imagery straight out of Eden, a really stunning and beautiful picture starts to emerge. And it doesn't stop there. The vision also includes a river of life and the tree of life, which are, of course, direct callbacks to the Garden of Eden in Genesis. The end of the story isn't some futuristic space city at all. It's a new, perfected Eden.
So, you see, this vision isn't just some weird tacked-on ending. It's the grand finale that ties the entire story together. It's the complete reversal of the curse from Genesis, healing that separation between humanity and God, and finally restoring the relationship that was lost way back at the very beginning.
So, why does any of this matter? What's the real point of decoding all this ancient imagery? Well, I think if we get lost arguing about the literal height of the city or the geology of a planet without oceans, we're completely missing the point. John isn't writing a blueprint for future city planners or geographers.
Instead, he's giving us a promise A profound promise, told through the most powerful symbols his audience would have understood. It's a promise that chaos and evil don't get the last word, that death isn't the end. It's a promise that all the brokenness of our world will one day be healed, and that the ultimate goal of all of history is reunion with God.
And maybe that's the most powerful idea of all. What if the end of Revelation was never meant to satisfy our curiosity about what will happen in the future, but instead to anchor our hope in the promise of it? A promise of ultimate renewal, restoration, and a brand new beginning.